Untrodden Peaks and Unfrequented Valleys, Section 30. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Untrodden Peaks and Unfrequented Valleys, A Midsummer Ramble Through the Dolomites, by Amelia B. Edwards. Chapter 12. The Sasso Bianco, Part 2. So we go on again, slowly but steadily, up the long slope and on to the foot of the rock wall aforesaid. Here are no steps ready hewn. We have to get up as best we can, and the getting up is not easy. The little crevices and inequalities which serve as footholds are in places so far apart that it is like going up the steps of the Great Pyramid, and but for Giuseppe, who goes first in order to do duty as a kind of wandlass, the rider, for one, would certainly never have surmounted the barrier. This stiff little bit over, we expect to see some sign of the summit, but on the contrary find ourselves, apparently, as far from it as ever. A second and a third slope still rise up ahead, as barren and unpromising as the last. And now even the Alp rose has disappeared, and not a bush of any kind breaks the monotony of the surface. But the gentians make a blue carpet underfoot, and the edelweiss, so rare elsewhere, so highly prized, flourishes in lavish luxuriance, like a mere weed. Presently we pass an unmelted snowdrift in a hollow some little way below the summit. Then quite suddenly a whole army of distant peaks begins to start into sight, and so, after 6 hours, we all at once find ourselves upon the top. We might, of course, have had a better day, but it is some reward after long toil to find the view to north and west quite free from mist. The vapours are still boiling up in the south and southeast, but not, perhaps, quite so persistently as an hour ago. At all events, they part from time to time, so that in the end, by dint of patient watching, we see all the near peaks in those quarters. It is now nearly half past 11 o'clock, and having eaten nothing since 5, we are all as hungry as people have a right to be at an altitude of between 4,000 and 5,000 feet above the breakfast table. So before attempting to verify peaks or heights or relative distances of any kind, we call for the luncheon basket and turn with undiminished gusto to the familiar meal of hard-boiled eggs and bread. The water in the flask being flat, Clementi fetches up a great lump of snow, and this, melted in the sun and mixed with a little brandy, makes a delicious draught as cold as ice itself. In the midst of this frugal festivity, Giuseppe, with the keen eye of a chamois hunter, recognizes L.'s maid, whom he calls the Signora Cameriera, on the Cordevole bridge just outside the village. We see only a tiny black speck, no bigger than a pin's head, but Clementi goes so far as to depose her parasol. In a moment they are both up, tying a pocket handkerchief to a white umbrella, and lashing the umbrella upon an alpenstock, which they erect for a signal, and the excitement caused by this does not subside till the black speck, after remaining stationary upon the bridge for about a quarter of an hour, creeps slowly away and is lost to sight in the direction of Caprile. Luncheon over, we set to work with maps and field glasses to identify all that is visible of the panorama. We are sitting now on the brink of the great yellowish cliffs that the writer sketched a little while back from below the Sasso di Ronch. All the heights and valleys on this side lie spread out before us, like the surface of a relief map. We look down upon the Monte Mignon and Monte Frisolet, both green to the top and scattered over with hamlets, farms, cultivated fields, and fir forest. Monte Mignon, estimated by Trinker at 7,838 feet, lies full 400 feet below, and Monte Frisolet considerably lower still. The Val Pettorina opens just under our feet, and one could almost drop a stone down into the little piazza of Rocca, where the Segro is going on merrily. We can see the peasants moving to and fro between the church and a great white booth, on the top of which a red flag is flying. Now and then, when the wind comes up this way, it brings faint echoes of the bells, and the braying of a brass band. As for the holiday folks, they look exactly like a swarm of very small black insects, all in motion. Monte Fernazza, farther to the right, appears to be considerably lower than Monte Mignon, but not so low as Monte Frisolet. except for a blackish ridge of igneous rock cropping out on the side of the pass of the Alleghe. This mountain is green and cultivated like the other two, and is apparently about 6,500 feet in height. So much for the minor mountains in our immediate neighbourhood. Of the larger, the two nearest, each being distant about 2 miles in a direct line, are the Marmolata and the Civita. The last fills all the south-eastern division of the horizon. Large masses of vapour flit from time to time across the face of that vast fretted screen, but they flit and pass away, and it lifts its noble head continually into the clear blue depths of the upper sky. The Marmolata stands up in bold profile, undimmed by even a thread of vapour. Mr. Gilbert, seeing this mountain from the Sasso di Dam and getting it also in profile, though from the western end, compared it to a huge stationary case, its vertical side to the south, and its long snow slope to the north. But taken here from the east end, whence one more clearly sees the sharp depression, or couloir, that divides the peaks, it absurdly resembles the familiar cocked hat worn by the first Napoleon, the precipitous side being of course the front of the hat, and the snow slope corresponding to the back. A great stream of snow lies in the cleft of the couloir, and all the northward slope is outlined, as it seemed, in frosted silver, but the great glaciers and snowfields that lie to the Fedaja are from here invisible. The green threshold of the Fedaja Pass, and the low jagged ridge of the Monte Padon, rise just north of the extreme eastern end of the Marmolata, which is buttressed on this side by the black precipices of Seranta. Monte Vernale, repeating from here as from Canazzi its curious resemblance to the Marmolata, lurks close under the southward wall of its huge neighbour, being divided from it by only a little green slope considerably higher than the Fedaja Pass, which Clementi points out as the Forcella Contrine, 9,052 feet, and which is also known as the Forcella di Val Ombretta, and as the Passo di Val Fredda. Still lower down towards the southwest lies the Sasso di Val Fredda, still unascended. A little beyond it comes the Monte Rigobetta, locally known as the Monzon, 8,634 feet in height, and on the same parallel, but still farther west, Monte Latemar, on whose summit the vapours rest all day. Northwest of the Marmolata, about 9 miles distant as the crow flies, rise the snow-streaked bastions of the Sella Massive, of which, however, only 2 great towers, the Boé and the Campolongo Spitz, are seen from this side, while in an opening between the Boé and the Marmolata rises a noble solitary rock, which proves to be the Lang Kofel, 10,392 feet in height, and distant about 13 English miles. A tiny glimpse of the Rosengarten is also seen in the gap above the Forcella di Contrine. Returning now to the point from which we started, and looking due north straight over the top of Monte Migion, the pinky snow-streaked line of the Set Sass, divided from Monte Lagosui by the Valparola Pass, comes into view. The Sasso d'Istria, which looked so imposing from near by, here shows as a small pyramidal rock of no importance. The crestollated crest of Monte Nuvalu dwindles to a tiny ridge on a long green slope. The caretta track of the Tre Sassi Pass winds between both like a white thread, and Monte Tofana, as usual sulky and cloud-capped, shows its pyramidal front only once, when the mists roll apart for a few moments. Following the parallel of the Tofana, we get misty glimpses of the Cristallino peaks, of the Cristallo, of the Drazinnen, Sorapis, and the Croda Malcora. The Rochetta and the fantastic ridge of the Bec de Mezzodi divide them off like a fence, while straight away to the east the Pelmo shows every now and then, quite clear from base to summit. Between the Pelmo and the Croda Malcora, part of the range of the Marmolo and the curved prow of the Lantaleo peep out through window-like openings in the clouds. Finally, above and beyond all these, ranging from northwest to northeast, in the only direction where the horizon is permanently clear, we look over towards a sea of very distant peaks, reaching far away into the heart of northern Tyrol. To the northwest, a little above and to the left of the Sass ridge, we recognise by help of the map the highest summits of the Zillerthal Alps, the Fußstein near the Brenner Pass, 11,451 feet in height, the 5 peaks of the Hornspitzen, ranging from 10,333 feet to 10,842 feet, and Hochfehler, 11,535 feet. Due north, exactly above the Sass, a long snow range glowing in the midday sun identifies itself with the Ansoller Alps beyond Bruneck, the highest points of which are the Wildgall, 10,785 feet, the Schneebiegsnock, 11,068 feet, and the Hochgall, still, I believe, unascended, and rising to 11,284 feet. Beyond these again, to the north-northwest, Clementi believes that he recognizes the Drehornspitz, 11,492 feet, and the Grossvendiger, 12,053 feet, these last being full 45 miles distant as the crow flies. Turning now from the northern half of the horizon, where all is so clear, it is doubly disappointing to face the mists which still keep pouring up from the south. Parting here and there at times, as if rent suddenly by gusts of wind from the southwest, they show now the tremendous wall of the Cimon della Pala, now the Castellazzo over against the Costonzella Pass, and behind the Costellazza the Cima d'Asti, now all the great Primiero peaks in detached glimpses, from the Pala di San Martino to the Sasso di Campo. The Pala di San Lucano, which rises due south of our position, also gleams out now and then, as also does the volcanic cone of the Cima di Pape. What might be visible on this side under more favourable circumstances, it is, of course, impossible to say; but I am inclined to think that the southward view, including as it does the Primiero group, would be finer than that from Monte Pavione, which is some 200 feet lower than the Sasso Bianco. As it is, even with one half of the horizon continually obscured, we succeed in identifying over 50 great summits, including all the Dolomite giants. I should be afraid to conjecture how many peaks which could not be verified with certainty must have been in sight. It was at the time, and is still, a matter of regret to the writer not to have been able to make some kind of panoramic outline, however rough, of the view from the summit. But it would have been useless to make the attempt under such heavy disadvantages, not more than 45 degrees of horizon being absolutely clear at any time. As regards the height of the Sasso Bianco, there can, I think, be no doubt that it rather exceeds than falls below 8,000 feet. A traveller more experienced in the use of the aneroid would doubtless be able to determine the matter to within a few feet, but I should myself be very diffident of giving a decided measurement. We observed the aneroid closely all the way from Caprile to the summit, and found that it rose 4,500 English feet. This, without any correction for the mean temperature of the column of air between the upper and lower stations, if added to the height at which Caprile stands above the sea level, namely 3,376 feet, would give an elevation of 7,876 feet. The temperature, however, varied greatly, the heat being intense as we wound round the mountain from east to south, and the change to cold and damp being very sudden when we came into the mists 1,000 feet below the summit. These mists, however, never rose to the height of the actual summit during the whole 2 hours that we remained upon the top. On the contrary, the sun shone uninterruptedly, and the temperature must have stood at from 70 to 75. Not venturing myself to deduce results from these imperfect observations, I have submitted my notes to an eminent mountaineer, whose opinion I prefer to give in his own words. Assuming the temperature to be respectively 50 and 70, we should have a correction of 280 feet, which must be added to your 4,500. The height would then come out 3,376 plus 4,500 plus 280 to 8,156 feet, so that I think you may safely put it at over 8,000 feet. In your letter you spoke of your peak being 400 to 600 feet higher than Monte Migion. Now Trinker gives the latter as 7,838 feet, which would bring the Sasso Bianco up to 8,238 or 8,438 feet, so that in this way you too get the estimate of over 8,000 feet confirmed. FFT. For the present, then, and until some more competent traveller shall determine this point with accuracy, the height of the Sasso Bianco may be allotted to stand at something over 8,000 feet. Having spent 2 hours on the top, and seeing no hope of any change for the better on the southern side, we reluctantly packed up and came down. By the time we reached Signora Pezzi's pasturages, the Sagro was breaking up in Rocca, and the contadini who lived in the scattered farms and cottages of Monte Pezza were coming up homewards. All asked if we had had a good view, if we were very tired, if we had found it difficult, and how long it had taken us to get to the top. "Brava, brava!" said one old man. "So, signoras, you have been up our mountain. Ebbene! E una bella montagna! But you are the first forestieri who have cared to find it out." It was amusing to see how pleased, and even flattered, they all seemed, as if being born and bred upon the mountain they took the expedition as an indirect compliment paid to themselves. When at length we reached Caprile, it was just 5:30 o'clock. We had been gone precisely 12 hours and a half; that is to say, we had been 6 hours getting to the top, including stoppages, and 4 hours and a half, including another stoppage, coming down. We might, of course, as I have already said, have had a better day. We might, as I fully believe, there being an almost continuous line of valleys, and no mountain range of any importance between, have seen straight down to Venice and the Adriatic on the south, to the Lake of Garda on the southeast, and perhaps, if the Marmolata is not in the way, to the Ortler Spitz on the east. In any case, the view to the north and northwest was extremely fine, and the near view over the whole surrounding group of Dolomites, which is of more importance than any distant view of peaks which are continually seen from other heights, is of the greatest interest. I doubt, indeed, if there can be any other point from which all the giants of the district can be seen at once, and to so much advantage. End of Section 30.